Welcome to the Secular Hub, a community where atheists, agnostics, humanists, and their families can meet, support each other, have fun, and explore ethics, science, and the human condition. Today, we hear from Dr. Laura Summers. The title of the talk, Media Literacy, Navigating the Digital Media Landscape in the Disinformation Age. Dr. Summers is a clinical assistant professor at the University of Colorado, Denver, where she's the program leader for the Learning Design and Technology graduate program. Dr. Summers has written over 22 articles and spoken at over 36 conferences in areas including digital citizenship and media literacy. Recently, Dr. Summers served as the media literacy expert on the Colorado Department of Education's Media Literacy Advisory Committee. Dr. Summers has also served as a consultant for or member of the boards of Learning Forward, Front Range Board of Cooperative Educational Services, and the Clyfford Still Museum. It was an honor to welcome Dr. Laura Summers.
Thank you for joining me tonight on a Thursday evening in the middle of September. I don't know where September's going. I can't believe it's already the middle of September. I'm just really excited to be here, and I'd love to know if you're comfortable sharing, who you are and what brings you here tonight. Are there any burning questions that you're hoping to get answered? And obviously in saying that, if I don't answer them deep enough for your preference and your learning tonight, I certainly want to be able to follow up with you and provide you more answers. So I'm going to go through my presentation and then, leave room for, leave time for questions. And hopefully you'll enjoy this as much as I have in getting ready for it. I wanted to introduce you to my family here. This is my son and daughter. We're staying on the corner in 16th Street Mall. We have been part of the Denver community for several years. And I do this for them. I do this so that they are informed citizens and that they understand how media influences our perceptions, and that they understand the biases and prejudice that also can come with media, and for them to recognize their own privilege and what they've been, the lens in which they've viewed the world. So they're an important part to my life. And so I do like to start out with letting you know the human side of me. And my son is a RTD bus driver, so he's around Denver quite a bit. And my daughter lives out of state in California, so I don't get to see her quite as often. But and if you want to reach out to me, I've provided you my email as well as my Twitter feed. And I would like to provide you a copy of these slides. I did share them earlier. So Chauncey, I don't know if you want to go ahead and upload them through the chat. That might be a good way to do that. Otherwise, I'll share them at the end.
I can do that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So my intentions tonight are really to deconstruct what media literacy means from your from the lens of everyday life, as concerned citizens, as community members, as parents, educators, professionals. This is a topic that is really pertinent to our times, and is really important that we have a better understanding. And I'll share more of that obviously as we go along. And then also just to be aware of what you can do to be informed of the news, the politics, and public communications. So like I said, if you have questions along the way, please post them in the chat. If you'd like to share a little bit more about your reference or where you're, what you've come here tonight with questions about, I'd also hopefully will be able to address those. So my agenda is three parts. First, I'm going to provide a context, what has led me here this evening, as well as what issues I see current issues that are happening. in our community, as well as strategies, tools, and resources. And that's always the fun part, is this, the presentation itself is full of links. So you'll receive a PDF, and several of those will actually, the pictures in fact will link out to different resources. So I decided it would be easiest to have it all within one document. So hopefully we can navigate that well. So I'm going to start with some context. Hopefully you're all still following me. So the Media Literacy Advisory Committee was commissioned by the Board of Education as a result of the House Bill 191110 that was signed in June of 2019. So I actually, as you explore more, if you look back through this presentation, you'll be able to actually go to that bill and see the progress that it made through the House. And very quickly, there was a very quick turnaround time for this bill. We convened as an advisory committee from August to December of last year. So we had a very short amount of time to meet the charges of that committee. And the intention was that since the bill passed, that there would be additional funding to put forth what we recommended in our final report that came out in January of 2020. So this past, not even a year yet. And our final report is meaty. It's lots of great resources. So as I said, as you explore more and you have a deeper sense of the different resources, that's a great place to go. As a professional, if you're a parent, as a concerned citizen, just, it's a very, I'd have to say we were very, we did a lot of due diligence in terms of checking our sources and making sure that the sources that we recommended were not biased. And so that was a really important part of our work together as a committee, is that we wanted to make sure that we really did that fact checking. So it was a great committee to be part of. We did have journalists as well as educators on the committee, professionals within the community. It was quite there's about 13 of us. And so I really appreciated the diverse voices that came to the table during that time. And so this is what we were asked to do in that short 4-month amount of time. So like I said, very, very fast. The hope is that there would be funding that was put through the House as well as the Senate, and that we would actually be able to implement quite a few of these materials and resources for the teachers, as well as really providing that educational support for districts to develop the policies and procedures around media literacy. As of right now, I know that things are kind of on hold. When COVID-19 hit, the funding stopped, and so now we're just in a holding pattern. But our hope is the information's out there, it's public, and hopefully it will not stop there. We'll certainly keep advocating for continued practice, and that's part of my role. I am, as the program leader of the Learning Design and Technology graduate program, one of our programs is the highly effective school library program, and this is a great, excuse me, a great area for librarians to really understand and advocate for. I haven't done a lot of talking today, so I can tell I start talking and then get the fog. One of the tasks of the Media Literacy Task Force was to actually agree with or to extend a definition. And so this was the definition that we did all agree on, and it comes from NAMLE. And NAMLE is the National Association of Media Literacy Education. And so this is one of the many resources that I wanted to share with you. Is right there, the very first line, it's media literacy can be summed up in the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create narratives. And so that's, when you look at those 5 verbs, that's it in a nutshell. Like it's really, sometimes I think we make it a little more complex than we need to. And as we go into the tools and the strategies, it's really important that we understand as individuals how to access, how to analyze, how to evaluate, and how to create, and then how to act on these different forms of communication. So I think that's really, I wanted to keep it simple, but I think the challenging part is that media is ever changing. And so that's where the challenge comes in. And so our report was, we were able to include the following strategies to improve the media literacy experience for Colorado students. And so this is something, I won't read the slide to you, but I did want you to know that these were the recommendations that we put forward that we will continue to work towards. The Colorado State Library, which is part of the Colorado Department of Education, is still very much invested in media literacy. Like I said, it's part of our program at CU Denver, and it's part of the Colorado academic standards. So every class should contain components of media literacy. And I feel that given the current state and everything that has been happening in our news, and this is, I think, getting more attention more than ever before, because people are really starting to realize that enough's enough, and that we really need to look at how we're addressing media literacy and the accuracy of the information that we follow. Are there any questions on the actual committee work, or anything that anyone would like to note in the question in the chat before I move on to the next set? I'm looking to the side if you're wondering where I'm looking. I'm looking up at my chat, so I have 2 screens here. Okay, I will keep going. If you have anything to ask, please go ahead and write it in the chat. So I wanted to bring us to what our awareness needs to be in terms of around current issues. So what do we need to know in terms of current state? We as, just when you think back over this past year, we are living in a very complex time. And I have chosen to use the word complex versus challenging, because I do practice the approach that let's be solution-based. Sometimes when we use the word challenge, we tend to think it's too hard, that we aren't going to be able to get to the summit of the mountain, as it's shown in this picture, that we won't succeed. And I actually still really feel pretty strongly that if we are aware of what sources out there, what media outlets, how to decipher what's being presented to us, that we can make pretty strong decisions based upon our own knowledge. And we can stand up against bias and prejudiced information. So I chose to use the word complex, and this has definitely been a year of complexity. It's, but it's also in this complexity, it's a wonderful opportunity to really meet this, like I said, meet this straight on, and know that we can figure out solutions if we come at it from that mindset, that we can use facts and we can use analysis to really get to those answers. So something to be aware of is that by the age of 18, 88% of our young adults tend to get their news from Facebook and other social media. And that was in 2015. So that study of over 1,000 adults between the ages of 18 and 34, that study is 5 years old. And so my guess is that number has probably increased even more. And there is new social media that I haven't even begun to explore yet, And what I'm thinking of, we're all familiar with Facebook, we know about Twitter, we have Instagram, and now there's TikTok, which is another example. And I personally haven't explored TikTok yet, but I can assume that once again, in terms of this information, that number is going up, it's not going down. It's also in the 2016, Stanford did an educational study that relayed the information that 82% of adults could not distinguish between sponsored content and a real news story. And that, once again, was 4 years ago. And think about it, it was prior to us being in a remote educational setting in many of our school districts. So now all of a sudden we're in a situation where students are online even probably more than what was reported of being online for over 7.5 to 9 hours. So it keeps going up. And I wanted you to be aware of a more current study. This was done through the Common Sense Media. They have been really strong advocates throughout this pandemic of providing resources for parents, for educators, for families, just to make sure that individuals in the nation are aware of what's out there. What can they trust? What information? How can they learn? How can they have that education and understanding what they're seeing on TV and in social media? But a piece to this that I think we have to be really aware of, one of the issues is the fact that in Colorado, and I chose from this website, I went to Colorado in particular, since I'm speaking to a local audience. It is, for me, it feels very concerning that this many students do not have access to the digital materials that they need in order to learn. And so in this time of remote learning, it's really important that we understand the limitations that come up with this. Because the more representation we have from all of our students and from all educators, the more likely we will make sure that those diverse voices are represented. Because right now, if you have less awareness of what's out there, you're going to just be exposed to the same material over and over again. For example, publishers have been known to use their own agenda, to use their own privileged perspectives to continue to publish what they want people to see. And that's not what we want. That's not right. And so this is really important to understand that even though we want to be aware that not everything that we see online is fair and unbiased, we have to allow everyone to be online so that we can advocate for a more equitable environment. So I appreciate the question that just came up. Kate asked, have there been any studies about changing the labeling for sponsored content to better convey what it is? That is a great question. I have not seen any studies in that area, but that hasn't been the focus of my work. My work is primarily around student voice and making sure that our students understand what they're viewing on the internet, the tools they need, the process they need to go through in order to have more reliable information. So, but great question, and I'll see what I can find out and share it. Make sure it gets to you through Chauncey. So how and what we search, this is another issue. I would preface, we oftentimes as adults have the same behaviors that our students have. And so the top ranking search on Google doesn't mean that the article is trustworthy. But in our fast-paced society, it's really easy to say, oh, I'm just going to take the first, I'm going to go right to what I surveyed or what I Googled, or, and take that very first, link. And what we have shown is, and what we need to make sure everyone's aware of, is that sometimes that top ranking article may just have happened to put the right tags in their algorithms. In their meta-analysis, they knew, they had done their homework, and they knew, oh, if we add these phrases, it's most likely going to go to the top. And then there's also reports of how funders, sponsors pay for certain information to also be ranked up at the top. And that's when I referred back to the publishers. It's just being aware of what are their practices and where might bias come into those practices. And then it's also really important to understand that our students, they judge the credibility of something, whether or not it's viable, reliable information, as to whether or not a photo is attached. There's something, we're still in that mindset that if there's a picture with it, that makes it credible. And so we just need to be aware of these so that we know how to approach them. And the best way to approach it from there with ourselves as well as with others is then to ask questions. And so we're actually going to talk about those questions here in just a few minutes. It's also, we are in a time now where we multitask. And even though we've been told that, and when I say we, I'm speaking very generally, so know that, I know that sometimes I try to multitask. It doesn't work. And even though I know it doesn't work, I catch myself doing it because things are so busy. And so when we're multitasking, we're not able to question the content that we're seeing, and we get things very quickly. So it's that tweet that might come across, or it might be that news flash that we see. And so if we hold on to that, and if there's that same news flash that's being repeated over and over throughout the day, that's what we're going to focus on. And we may not take time to then question it or to think about it more deeply. I know there was a point during the, I'd say, spring, that I turned off the TV. I couldn't watch the news anymore. I was like, okay, this is too much. I'm getting the same information over and over again. And it's definitely filling me with a lot of fear and trepidation. And I'd rather be able to check my sources and decide where I want to get my news from. So the TV went off, wasn't on for a while, just until I could kind of get a grip on what was happening around me with all the COVID statistics. So that's just a little personal insight there. So here's what happens. So as I referenced, there's this idea behind one of the issues being visual appeal. This is a picture of nuclear flowers. And this picture was shown to 170, as I put there, 170 high school students. And they believed it was real. They believed that this post was accurate based upon seeing this picture. So what the Stanford History Education Group, what they were trying to find out, a few years ago in 2016, was they were trying to find out, what was the process that students were going through in terms, when they were looking at websites, when they were looking at pictures. And so they would share this information with them. And this was the result of one of those. And so I thought that was really important to understand. And if you're interested in this type of study, I've also provided the link there to you as well. Stanford is doing quite a bit in media literacy, and they have an entire site dedicated to civic online reasoning with several resources. And so it's really been, that was one of the sites that we we're able to share in our report from the Department of Education, and is one that I've actually since then have been working with a large school district and making sure they know about cases like this. So, and it looks really, first glance, it would look like I said, when you get that news flash or you get that social media post that comes across really quickly, if you don't stop to think about it, you might just think it's real. And here's another example. With social media, stories may look the same no matter what the source is. So here are two same exact stories around Saudi Arabia and presented in two totally different ways. So this was from the New York Times, this was from the right-wing news. And so it definitely shows you where the slant can come in. And so this was another, just another area to be aware of, is that things can look like they're reputable. They can look like they're coming from a newsworthy source when they're in fact, they've been doctored. And so what's happening in this case with social media is there's what's called the echo chamber effect. And these algorithms tend to bring up what you like and show you more of the same content. So if anyone has a social media account, you may have already seen that with the advertisements that you see over and over again. So you have to be really careful what you shop for once, because the next thing you know is you're going to see that over and over again. I have fun with that sometimes. And, if you purposely go out just to see, oh, let's see if, I'm going to look at, I have a grandson. So, the one time I go out and I look at something for my grandson, then I keep seeing the same things over and over again for young children. So it's just kind of fun to see what happens, but it is also very serious because their motive is to keep you on the site longer because they want you to buy something. They want you to stay there, and they think, oh, if we keep showing you the same items, or if we keep showing you the same stories that you've engaged in the past, you'll keep coming back, and you'll keep checking our links, and you'll keep paying our advertisers. So it's very much based upon the advertising revenue. So that is called the echo chamber effect, and it's something that the Stanford study talks about as well. So here is a video that I also wanted to bring up. It's around what's happening because of our advanced technology. And these are called deep fakes. And some individuals are using them for humor. They're finding them, they're dubbing old shows. If you go out on YouTube, you'll find one that took, for example, Full House, and he put mustaches on all the characters. There's one that's from Back to the Future as a video. But I really wanted you to have the context behind that. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment, and we're gonna play that video.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
Jordan Peele created this fake video of President Obama to demonstrate how easy it is to put words in someone else's mouth.
Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
Not everyone bought it, but the technology behind such frauds is rapidly improving, even as worries increase about their potential for harm. This is your Bloomberg QuickTake on deepfakes. Deepfakes, or realistic-looking fake videos and audio, gained popularity as a means of adding famous actresses into porn scenes. Despite bans on major websites, they remain easy to make and find. They're named for the deep learning artificial intelligence algorithms that make them possible. Input real audio or video of a specific person, the more the better, and the software tries to recognize patterns in speech and movement. Introduce a new element like someone else's face or voice, and a deepfake is born.
It's actually extremely easy to make one of these things. There were just some supposed, breakthroughs from academic researchers who work with this particular kind of machine learning in the past few weeks, which would drastically reduce the amount of video you need actually to create one of these.
Programs like FakeApp, the most popular and widely available for making deepfakes, need dozens of hours of human assistance to create a video that looks like this rather than this. In August, researchers at Carnegie Mellon revealed software that accurately rendered not just facial features, but changing weather patterns and flowers in bloom. This advance is not yet available to the public, but with increasing capability comes increasing concern.
You know, this is kind of fake news on steroids, potentially. We do not know of a case yet where someone has tried to use this to perpetrate a kind of fraud or an information warfare campaign, or for that matter, to really damage someone's reputation. But it's the danger that everyone is really afraid of.
In a world where fakes are easy to create, authenticity also becomes easier to deny. People caught doing genuinely objectionable things could claim evidence against them is bogus. Fake videos can also be difficult to detect, though researchers around the world and at the U.S. Department of Defense have said they're working on ways to counter them. Deep fakes do, however, have some positive uses. Take Cereproc, a firm that creates digital voices for people who lose theirs from disease.
Speech synthesis is the artificial production of human speech.
There are also applications that could be considered either good or bad, like the many, many deepfakes that exist solely to turn as many movies as possible into Nicolas Cage movies.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Great, I'm going to share my screen again. So I teach a trends and issues class, and so that was something that we actually discuss in class, is the fact that, you know, with these fake videos and how easy they are to create, you know, the intention was, you know, to have, like, originally, people were doing it for fun. But they can have serious ramifications. And so when I think about elections and just other news, the influence that a fake video can have on, you know, depending on, you know, the political message being provided is alarming. And so, you know, I didn't know how many people were familiar with these and that they were happening. Yeah, someone mentioned that the Nicolas Cageified movies. Yes, that was done in fun. And there are, you know, there are some positives in terms of when they were trying for those who needed support, like for voice. So I think it's important to understand that this is what makes this complex. Is this media literacy is complex, and the fact that what can be used as, you know, an asset can also be used to harm. And so we just need to be conscious of what we're doing and to really understand what the motives, what the agenda behind that is. So wanted to share that with you. If you want to rewatch the video, you'll actually have access to that source within the slide deck. So I'm still good on time. We have, I want to make sure I leave time for questions, but I also want to make sure I give you the good stuff, the strategies and the tools and the resources. So the very first one is really, really simple. And this actually came from the School Library Journal. So they mentioned in this article that I've also linked on this slide, is just to say, well, wait a minute, you know, if you're noticing that something might be looking out of place, or if it's feeling too good to be true, they just have what they simply refer to as the WOE test. So I had to throw that in there because I thought, well, that's simple. And like I said, sometimes we do make things more complicated than they need to be. So the idea is that if you don't know, if you have any questions about it, you need to investigate. You need to look into it farther. So yes, invest the time, it'll be worth it. And then these are the questions that fact finders use. And this is in reference to this is a strategy called lateral reading. And it's 3 simple questions. Who's behind the information? What's the evidence? And what do other sources say? And so you can, if you see something in, let's say, in these Facebook example, if somebody puts in a source from Facebook, it's pretty easy to just go out and check, you know, type in a keyword search, type in the title, and see what other sources are saying. And then you'll start to see if it's, you know, legitimate who is behind the information? What's the, what do they say about the person? Because that can tell you a lot too. So I've provided you more examples here because I think that's a place where you can dig in deeper. And then obviously in terms of authenticity visually, so one of the things that with these fake videos, it's, check those eyes, check the eyes, check the mouth. If you go out on YouTube and look at like the Nicolas Cage examples or at the Back to the Future examples, you'll definitely see some differences in the eyes and mouth. You'll see some uneven skin tone. The lip syncing doesn't quite match up, or there's funny shadows that definitely. But also just to let you be aware, an article that was published just over a year ago in 2019 is there's now a website that is creating lifelike faces of people who don't really exist. So as technology gets more advanced, we have these emerging technologies, I think it's really important to just be aware so that you can check your facts. And so once again, investigating the accounts behind the post, investigating any linked sources. Oftentimes instead of clicking on the link itself though, I will actually, type it in and see, where does it take me? There are, and what I'm sharing with you next is some places you can go to actually get that information. But I did want to mention NAMLE. NAMLE is the National Association for Literacy Education. And the reason that I do mention them is because it is a free membership. And that is where a lot of these resources can be found, a lot of the fact checking. They've got some great tools. They have what's the source down here at the bottom of the screen is a one-pager. And it gives you, these are the 5 questions or 6 questions from that one pager. And they also go more deeply into that through some key questions. So who made the source? Why was it made? What's missing? And what we're trying to do within our library program and our learning design program is really get our students, not only students in K through 12, but also our graduate students to really ask these questions anytime they use any type of digital media. And so these 6 questions, that's why NAMLE created that one pager, it's really easy just to keep that close at hand near the computer and refer back to this. And a big one for me has always been who will benefit from the message. If there's some type of financial benefit, that to me immediately I've got to check and see what is the behind scene story. Go to a website, find out who the about section on that website to find out more. And I don't have time to check the Wikipedia. But one of the things I'm going to say to that, and this is based upon my own investigation of that, is Wikipedia is very quickly, anything that is put on Wikipedia, in most cases, is checked very quickly. So there is a kind of a reference check that happens through different members within Wikipedia. So within hours, falsified information or information that's not accurate will be tagged and they will be notified. So it is something that we've actually, as a program, we've had our students try to go ahead and put out information on Wikipedia as to add to the reliability of that source. So as open education resources come into more use, you're going to find a lot more member checking. So this is checking that's coming from experts out in the field, people that are at universities that are really conscious of what bias and prejudice can show up in messages. And so this is one where I I tell my students, you can use Wikipedia to get some really informative, quick searches and then dive deeper from there. So I'm not sure, like I said, I didn't have time yet to go to that link that's been posted in the chat, but that would be my recommendation. So here's what I wanted to get to before we ran out of time. Hopefully you've heard of Snopes before. There are also several other fact checkers, and any one of these will take you directly. If you click on in the PDF, it'll actually take you out to these sites. And these have been fact checked as a source, so even their reliability has been checked. And this has been kind of become a game here at my house. My husband and I, our friends will post something in social media, and we will use one of these fact checkers to go out and see if it's true. And then depending on whether or not we want to press farther, we actually then follow up and post a response with what we discovered. Because right now people are really quick to believe something, even when there is no factual information behind it. So I wanted to definitely share these behind you. I'm not sure with you. I'm not sure if you've seen them before. And then the other one that I wanted to mention to you, just so you're aware, and this is also a topic of great conversation, is that we know that online news media, there are bias in anything that's published. I write creative nonfiction, and in writing creative nonfiction, even I have to state within my own work, this is coming from my perspective, and my perspective is privileged, and so I have to recognize my own bias in that. And so the media outlets that tend to do the most, stay more center are the ones there in the middle. So if you look at those, you'll find that NPR, for example, is a very centrally based news organization. I'm not saying that their stories won't have a slant through this website, that their ratings tend to be more centrally based. And then you can see there the extreme left side as well as the extreme right side. And so this is just a great, you might dig around that website. I've linked it here through the PowerPoint. Go out there and kind of see what this all sides is saying about each of these resources. And then you just be aware that, so NPR news may be right in the center, but then as you go to NPR opinion, they're going to be more liberal in their approach compared to, if you head over on this side, you'll see some more conservative. And with the election coming up, I thought this might come in handy for you to be aware of, kind of when you're watching the news or reading the news, just to kind of see where a news organization has decided to be. Because they're making, their sponsors are making a choice. And so this is where, their funding is based upon where they've decided they want to be, if that makes sense. And here's another really quick guidance for fake news checking. I've mentioned some of this before, just in terms of, that gut check, if something's got you stirred up. If they're getting a reaction from you, we really need to check the facts, because that most likely means that there could be some bias there. And, you may agree with how they're representing something, but you just need to be aware of what the situation is. All right, I think I've left time for questions, right? And I'm looking at the chat. Oh, great question. What roles do others, so the first part here was, as consumers, we have to protect ourselves from disinformation and misinformation. What role do others, media, legislators, Facebook, et cetera, have in limiting disinformation? If I've noticed that social media sites, Facebook being mentioned here, they have said that they are aware of misinformation. The question I then ask is, how quickly does misinformation get removed from a site? So I have noticed that, so here's an example, just in a small investigation amongst librarians, we found that misinformation on Twitter was actually removed more quickly than it was from, say, Facebook. But that is not like I said, that even saying that, I'm letting you know of just something that we were investigating. It was not a published study of any means. And so that's definitely something just to be aware of, is that I always look at how quickly does a source, how quickly do they take down that misinformation? Or are they advertising and sharing an abundant amount of information on a particular side? So you also have to be aware of that. And really, when it comes down to it, as consumers, unfortunately, you're going to have to take the primary responsibility. I am cautious in saying that there is any news outlet out there that I would fully trust. And that's just my cautious. That's just my own personal opinion. I just feel like I know how to go through and ask the questions that I've shared with you today. And it's taking that time and just really educating those around us, those we care about, to do the same. So it really does come back to us and having to be. And now, hopefully, as we do this more and more, and as we call attention to the bias that is out in the news, my hope is that there'll be less and less. But I also am well aware of sponsorship and the financial advertising, and so it's very easy for social media to say, well, they bought an ad, we accepted that ad. But there are organizations out there that will say, we're aware of this bias, and so I tend to look more towards them. So like I said, Common Sense Media, NAMLY, I look at those educational sources and feel really comfortable because they've earned my trust, because they're presenting me with not only the analysis checklists, but they're willing to say, this is where this news media tends to go. They'll just come right out and say, and you'll see that in the fact checking ones that I shared. They'll say, they tend to be more on the right conservative side or more on the liberal side. How do we ensure actions by the above aren't over-restricting access to legitimate information? It happens. And so how do we make sure that it's not overtly, once again, as consumers, as citizens, on the positive side, we have more access to putting out our own news than ever before. So through, I mentioned open education resources. I can share more about that with you in terms of follow-up links, but we can do the fact checking. We can say that based upon the fact checking that we've done, that it's legitimate. We can ask the questions that need to be asked. And so I think we've seen that in recent times more and more, is that we as community members are asking the hard questions, and we keep asking. And we too can have social media accounts to ask those questions. And I see that happening quite a bit on Twitter. And I do find that I love the fact that, yes, even though we have to also see that we may not like some of this disinformation, but we can counter that. We can call attention to that. And that's, I think, really an important step. So we do have to be active. We have to be active consumers. The time is gone where we can just sit back and think someone else will take care of it. That isn't the case anymore. And so, just even, like I said, the little piece we're doing that I personally am doing is when a friend posts something that I feel is disinformation or misinformation, I really feel like it's my responsibility, because I know better, because I'm conscious around this, that I post a counter to that. And they may not listen to me. I can't do anything about that. But I think it's really important that I at least address it, because then I've provided them the information. I've said, have you gone to this source? Have you seen what's posted here? And then they can decide whether or not they're going to listen. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But at least I've done my part. And the time of just sitting back and thinking someone else will take care of it, can't do that. Have there been any studies about before or after the library program? I'm not quite sure what I need a little more clarification on that question. Yes, and headline elements and quotes, that's supposed to be red flag. Agree, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Oh, I'm just wondering if like you've tested students, or if the librarians have tested students like before and after, if there's been an improvement after the instruction?
Yes. So there has been, there's been some really informal, so one of the classes I teach is it's called practitioner-based research. And so we do these small little research studies within libraries, within our own courses. And they have shown that as students are exposed to more and more of the media literacy lessons, there is a change in habits. There's a change in patterns. That being said, it's really important that it's integrated into different subject areas. And so that's why the Department of Education really wanted to make sure that we were putting attention to this information, and making sure that someone didn't see that it was just a standalone, something you did outside of the curriculum, that you actually integrated it into those essential skills for graduation. So what I love seeing is when the student goes home and shares it with the parent, and then the parent is also then aware. There was last winter, there was some pretty negative tweets that went out when a district decided not to do a snow day. And so it was a really unfortunate example of showing how the adults were behaving, and how that affected the students. And so that was a great, great opportunity, unfortunately, where we were able to talk with that entire district of librarians and talk to them about, when this happens, this is a live, real life example of why we need to make sure our students understand their role as digital citizens. So the earlier we can start that, I feel really positive about those results. So thank you, Kate. Those are great questions.
Awesome, thank you.
And Kate also had another question about the emotional component. Yes, that does happen. And I think I did talk briefly about that. Is I know that when I counteract what someone's passionate about and what they're believing, and I have a friend in mind as I say that, she's still, that emotion, that's what makes this complex. And I'm just going to need to stay really grounded in my approach. And my responsibility isn't so much I'd love to be able to persuade her differently, but I'm hoping that at least there are others that might have been persuaded by her that will then stop and look up the information. So if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And what resources do we have to counter official misinformation from government sources? The fact-checking sources that I gave you, those are the ones that I'm aware of that they actually do make note of, especially political messages. Or the other one, I'm doing a memory search here. In NAMLY, they also have a page on COVID-19. So fact checking for COVID-19. So that's something that the government's been putting in terms of the information they've been putting out. So you can go there for more COVID-19 facts. They also have published some race resources. And so that's another one that, just in terms of checking information, I feel pretty confident about the work that they're doing in that area as well, in terms of race and equity. Other questions? Yes, yeah. So the question is, do I find value in checking in on more bias or fringe news sources to see if the major news sources are simply not covering stories that I may find important? And I know that's happening. So I think it is important to be aware of, like I said, when you look at that all media and you look at all the different sources they mentioned, most of those are pretty well known. So if you do check some of the lesser known or some of the more local sources, you'll sometimes get a different type of, as you said, the fringe news sources, you'll get a different perspective than you might from a national news source. So I think that's really, there was some, and I didn't double check it, but I had a student talk about going to a small local news outlet around some of the political news and got a different story than from a national news source. So I do know that happens. I don't have any more information on that, but it is something to investigate.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Summers, for speaking with us today. I think it's a super important topic, especially in the lead up to an election. So really glad that you could join us. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you find the resources that come in handy, and that that you feel like if you want to reach out with any additional questions, please feel free to.
We here at the Secular Hub are happy you could join us and hope you enjoyed listening to today's talk. To learn more about the Secular Hub and our upcoming events, to become a member, or to show your support, find us on the web at secularhub.org. Before we wrap, I'd like to give a special shout out and thank you to our speaker and also to the volunteers who put in the time and effort to bring this event to life. We see you, and we couldn't do this without you.